Hi, and welcome to this conversation on climate conscious leadership. A conversation with Amanda Ellis and me, Hylke Faber, about a course that is ongoing at ASU, at the College for Global Futures. And I'm very happy to be here today with you, Amanda. Welcome.
Thank you.
So let me ask you a question to get us started. What has you be excited and inspired to even think about the climate?
Wow. Very important question. So I guess I need to start with a confession. And that's that as ambassador to the United Nations, when the UN Sustainable Development Goals were being negotiated, SDG 13 on climate was something that I thought was a long way off, somebody would solve, and we had plenty of time to really worry about. It's become increasingly clear over the last couple of years, as we have seen the reports from the Intergovernmental Panel on climate change, that in fact time is really running out. And this is the decisive decade. If we tip over 1.5, 2 degrees, scientists are now telling us we might be really reaching tipping points in the Earth's buffer zone where we can't foretell the consequences. So I cannot think of a more important topic than climate consciousness right now.
Thank you, Amanda. So when you think about climate, you talked about being part of the UN and the policies. What role do you see corporations have in that?
Well, corporations have an incredibly important role to play in addressing the climate crisis. First, because some corporations have a much larger footprint than some countries. And second, because of the incremental power that corporations have through making changes in the way in which they operate to really bring about positive change. And I'm thinking here of Walmart, for example, where the supply chain has been greened over the last 7 years in a way that now means all suppliers wanting to be part of the Walmart family have to ensure that they meet climate conscious and sustainability specifications. So you can see that there are really big ramifications. I think the third thing is also those people who work in corporations, and they're really the target of the course that you've designed. We know that there's a transformational power among those who are really engaged with the philosophy of their corporation. And here's another wonderful example, Starbucks, which aims to be both people and planet positive by 2025. And when you see the level of engagement of employees, it's so impressive. So for corporations, first, they need to be aligned with the Paris Agreement and the recent updates. 90% of companies have now pledged to be net zero in terms of their carbon footprint by 2025. And then second, we look at the ability of corporations to influence through those that purchase from them. And then third, the ability for those who work in corporations to really feel engaged and go the extra mile if aligned with climate consciousness.
Well, thank you. So you said something about it was impressive to see what happens at Starbucks with that 2025 target, right? And it's something that brought me to design this course because I believe in the power of each individual to do far greater things than our ego mind at first believes. Right? So we can step through all kinds of limitations to find things that are much more powerful, much more connected, much more impactful. In this course, it's called Climate Conscious Leadership. We integrate both working on consciousness, so working on ourselves, and getting to know more about the science of climate change. So what happens in the climate because of all the different factors and how we contribute to it. So what do you think is the power of that combination when you bring those two things together? These are basically different parts of leaders, like knowing more about yourself, knowing how to lead, and also knowing more about the material of climate change itself.
I love this integrated approach of ensuring that you have an academic or a head-focused dimension, and then a personal development dimension. The idea of leading with your heart and being able to improve both your knowledge and ability to speak to others and persuade them to change, but also thinking about this element of consciousness that you talk about, Hylke, which is such a critical ingredient to knowing who we are as people and being able to contribute to a different kind of integrated awareness. And I guess for me, in recent years, I've become much more conscious of the idea of being a part of a living planet. So your approach by teaching more of the science so people can understand better, because it is really complicated, and also thinking about personal development, and that the integration of those two things seems to me very exciting.
Yes, I see that as well. So we talk about climate conscious leaders, and personally I grow a lot from stories. I have these people in mind and I think, FDR, that person, or I think about Buddha, or I think about Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela, or one of those people, or actually my grandmother. I think about her. These people that inspire me to become taller on the inside. Can you think of people that inspire you, that you think, those are climate conscious leaders that lift me up?
The climate leaders who inspire me are all young women, starting with Greta Thunberg and her insistence that the house was on fire and we were all behaving as though there was nothing going on. She really brought attention to the issue in a way that no leader or climate scientist had done before. Second, Xie Bastida, who is an indigenous Chilean, Mexican climate activist who led the Fridays for Future New York City march back in 2019, just before the pandemic. And the emphasis on indigenous wisdom and becoming more conscious of our planetary systems and the fact that we are part of them. We can't be separated. And for me, another amazing, inspiring leader.
That's great. So when you think about those leaders like Greta, does that inform how you lead? Because you're also very dedicated to this field now.
Being brave enough to call out what you don't understand is, I think, the biggest learning for me. So seeing one so young write so brilliantly about these issues, and I think many young people understand a lot more about the climate science than those of us who are older and may not have studied science. So being able to ask questions and say, hey, I don't understand. So just today, I found out that natural gas is a euphemism for methane. I had no idea. And I know that methane is 84 times more potent than CO2. And with the Conference of the Parties at Glasgow, there was an estimate that we could save 0.2 degrees if we paid more attention to simple things like stopping methane flaring. And I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, natural gas is actually just methane? I thought it was some kind of clean energy. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm probably not the only one thinking that. So how is it that we deconstruct some of the greenwashing that has clearly gone on from the fossil fuel industry? And when we look at the fact that there's been, first of all, climate denial against the scientific facts, then climate obfuscation, we're not really sure about it, climate doubt, and now we're talking about costs. And I've got a whole nother piece on that. But for me, learning continually about this and then being brave enough to have conversations about it. I think that's what Catherine Hayhoe, the chief scientist for the Nature Conservancy, says. Be brave. Don't worry about the politics. Have a conversation about climate.
I love that. So it's being brave, being able to, and also calling things out. I love it when you say, also calling it out when you don't know, being able to say that. So I'm putting myself in the chair now of corporate leaders who are maybe in the middle of their careers and have lots of responsibilities. You know, we know that people are busy, we're busy, we have quarterly targets, we have financial expectations both from our corporation as well as from home. What would you say to them in thinking about doing something about the climate in the face of all the other constraints that are on them, and on top of all the propaganda around them that may tell them that it's not yet time, or it's too hard, or it's too costly, or somebody else will do it?
First, for me, the most important thing as an economist is to debunk this notion of cost. So the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, estimated that in 2020, we spent $5.9 trillion, trillion with a T, on fossil fuel subsidies, both direct and indirect. Now the estimate is that for a green transition it would be $1 to $3 trillion a year. So in fact, it is far more expensive to be keeping on this old-fashioned trajectory, which has a whole range of negative co-benefits like air pollution. There's about 7 million deaths a year from air pollution, terrible destruction to the environment with drilling, many unintended consequences, as we've seen with oil spills all around the world. So that would be the first thing to debunk for corporates, because cost and bottom line is always really important. So how is it that we look at this from a really clear-eyed perspective economically? Yes. Second of all, we need to look at consumer demand. And consumers are really now requiring corporations to make this shift. And the third most important thing is really engagement of staff. There's an alignment between people coming to work, and again referencing millennials, and wanting to feel that they are aligned with their values. And when we look at the data point that 90% of corporates have now committed to net zero targets by 2050, it's an imperative for all leaders, whether they be middle managers or senior managers, to be ensuring that they are factoring that in and figuring out how they're going to be able to meet those targets.
Fantastic. So thank you for that. So when you think about people taking this course on climate conscious leadership, and they'll learn something about themselves, the metaphor I like to use is people learn to tame your crocodiles. So people learn to tame the parts of them that might be saying, no, I can't do this because of fear X, Y, Z. Learning to look that in the face, be brave, as you said, Amanda. What would you say, what would you hope for people to walk away with from a course like this on climate conscious leadership?
Well, first of all, I'm super excited that I'm going to get to read this book, and I hope you're going to give everybody on the course a book. But second, I would hope that I would have a better understanding of the climate science, and I would feel more integrated as a leader in being able to explain why the science is so critical, and then hoping to feel much better about myself, that I'm helping to save the planet and be planet and people positive than contributing to the problem.
So as we close this conversation, how do you think people will be able to support themselves and keep motivated to do this work of becoming a climate conscious leader, which requires oomph and bravery? Like what do you see as ways for people to support themselves?
Well, as I understand the way you're designing it to be a very collaborative course, not only will people come away with tools they can use as individuals, but they'll also have found their tribe and will have a group of peers they can go to for advice, share their journeys with, and hopefully work together with to create really impactful change.
Thank you so much, Amanda.